This is the primal scream of a dying regime.
Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot on all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish in my soul, I wish that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Wednesday, 19th of August, Anno Domini 2026. Harnwell here at the home on Steve Bannon's War Room. Good evening. Let's bring on Frank Walker straight away. We've got Jenny coming on in a moment as well. But let's bring on Frank straight away. Hey, Frank. Hope everything is well with you. Had a good week. Folks, when we do this show, when we put this show together, we always try as best we can to pick stories that are not only going to be of interest, especially on the show that we do on Wednesdays, that has a particular look on along developments, let's say developments in Christianity. We always try to pick stories that are going to be of interest. If it's a Catholic story, we'll try and show how it's going to be interesting and important to evangelicals and vice versa. But we always try to pick out stories, if we can, when they exist, that are illustrative of wider the wider reality of the situation. There is no better example of us doing that than the story we're going to lead with today. Denver, if you wouldn't mind, please very kindly put up the article for the first one in the background as I'm talking to Frank here. This is a perfect example of exactly what is wrong in the post-conciliar church. Headline: Jewish woman elected president of Catholic Biblical Association of America. That's it. And I even picked out the article here from the Jerusalem Post. And I'll tell you why this is important, and then we'll break it down with Frank Walker. Because now you can imagine how, assuming they mean well, you could, which I don't anymore, but you can imagine how, from a certain view, to the bishops and cardinals in the Vatican that make these appointments, that this shows just how liberal they are, how non-bigoted they are, how open they are. Let's bring in a Jewish scholar to head the Catholic Biblical Association. And isn't that wonderful? Isn't that tolerant? Isn't that non-judgmental? Frank Walker, isn't that so non-judgmental of the Catholic Biblical Association? Here's the problem. Yeah, you're very impressed. I was very impressed with the non-judgmental folk. Look, the problem with this, okay, and we're going to break this story down. Fundamentally, it's this. This Jewish scholar whose name is Amy Jill Levine, as someone, and we'll if we get to it, there was even a suggestion that she was actually a Messianic Jew. You can imagine the people who put that rumor about, trying to dissuade the scandal that is already inherent in this story. So, oh no, she's ethnically Jewish, but really she's a Christian. She's a Messianic Jew, and she herself, Professor Levine herself, came out and said, no, she goes to an Orthodox Jewish synagogue. She's definitely Jewish. The problem with this, from a Christian perspective, is that Jews formally, one could almost say it's like an article of faith, they don't accept Jesus Christ as the Messiah. Yeah. Or as we would say in Christian terms, Lord and Savior. They accept Jesus Christ as God. That's the problem with this. Because basically, Frank Walker, I'll hand over to you on this point. But basically, the Catholic Biblical Association of America is making the claim that of all the scholars it's associated with around the world, it doesn't have anyone better to have as its new president than someone who fundamentally rejects the divinity of Jesus Christ. And that's why I say this story is illustrative of the wider malaise in the post-conciliar Catholic Church. Because, folks, that is the default position of most of the institutional Catholic Church. They don't believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ. If they did, they would find this story absolutely scandalous.
Right.
But they don't find it scandalous because they don't believe either. Frank Walker.
No, and this is where ultimately, now that Leo is in charge and Francis were in charge, this is where the Vatican gets a lot of its decisions from these scholars. This woman, the Catholic side of her life is not militant, like you're just describing, but she's still militant about being Jewish. So, you have a relation that's sort of inimical, and they mentioned in this post that she actually wants to black line things out of Scripture. And one of them is because it's anti-Jewish, but you'll have a back and forth between Christ and the Pharisees where they're calling each other devils. Your father is of the devil, but they say that Jesus has the devil too, but that's hostile. So they have to cut the parts that Jesus said out. So they're still identifying with the antagonistic relationship between Jesus and the Jews, but they want to excise that all out of the gospel. People don't understand. This became a big story, went around the world, because to have somebody like this in charge of this Catholic Bible Association is incredible, a Jewish person, but she's actually been there for decades. And what they don't know is the 1,000 people that are in that organization, very few of them actually probably are Catholic. In fact, when it comes to practicing faithful Catholics, there may not be any at all among the 1,000. Another thing they don't know about this operation is that the bishops are connected to it because it goes back, 90 years. And they already gotten together with this operation on their Bible translations, not just Bible translations, but the catechism and the lectionary. Catholics, they go through the Bible every 3 years. They go through the Bible in Mass. They hear gospel, they hear readings. She has influence over what gets edited out of what they say. And she also has influence on what the priests say in their homilies. And she's interested in having more influence in this already. She says, I've had a love affair with the Catholic Church my whole life, but it's chaste. I think that's a complete lie. I think that she is raping the Catholic Church. I think that she's a radical and she's there to destroy the Catholic Church. It's just, we have no idea how involved. In fact, the executive that's in charge of the Catholic Bible Association that hired her just now, he doesn't appear to be Catholic either. He's Baptist educated. He's at Yale Divinity School, but he was at Notre Dame for quite a long time. Now she has a history with Francis. She has a book, the Jewish Annotated Bible, and she gave it to Pope Francis.
3 times.
She met with him 3 times. And
Three
Francis
times
said, this is a wonderful and important work. Please put this where I can read it.
Of course. Yeah. Birds of a feather flock together, right? Of course.
Exactly.
None of these people from start to finish are Catholic. That's why nobody's scandalized by this, because none of them fundamentally believe that Jesus Christ is God. None of them. Those who are Catholic within the Catholic Church, they might give lip service to that because it pays the bills. It pays the mortgage, puts the roof over the head, puts 3 square meals down a day, being an employee in one way or another of the Catholic Church, and it's a grift. This is a story that the Catholic Church is an institutional vehicle built, constructed, paid for by the sacrifice of the martyrs and the saints and 2,000 years of faithful and the peasants putting the penny on the plate, right? And it's now, since the Second Vatican Council onwards, it is now the institution that is the fundamental meal ticket to a class of parasites and grifters and usurpers. And this story, I think, exemplifies, Frank Walker, what you and I come on this show every Wednesday evening and beat the same drum about Catholic Inc., about Trad Inc. It's all here in this story. Her shtick, by the way, Professor Levine's shtick, is in the first century church, the first century Jewish traditions, because she thinks Catholics should know more about first century Jewish traditions. Now, look, I can, and as someone who's Jewish, I think the old term used to be a Jewess, but as someone who's Jewish, she might actually have something to share on that point. But I'm only interested to hear about first century Jewish traditions if the point of that instruction is to underline even more how Jesus Christ was the fulfillment of the prophets and the messianic expectations, right? I'm interested to hear about first century Jewish traditions if we see them being incorporated into the start of the liturgy of the Mass, right? Because these things fundamentally reinforce something that the Catholic Church before the Second Vatican Council used to believe, but these days doesn't because it's not Catholic, and that is that the Catholic Church fundamentally was the continuation of the Jewish people and the Jewish promises under the New under the New Covenant, right? That was a one long continuous. So it used to be the Catholic Church's position that, of course, post Christ, of course, Jews need to convert to Christianity and accept Jesus Christ as Savior, because there is fundamentally no New Covenant Jewish tradition anymore. It was all subsumed into into Christianity. That used to be the position. And all, by the way, as far as I'm aware, up until even up until the time of Luther, right? All Christians, Catholics and Protestants, believed this, that Christianity was the fulfillment and continuation of Judaism. Therefore, there was no continuing Jewish covenant. So it all comes back to this point, Frank Walker. It all comes back to this point. The people who are running the Catholic Church into the ground don't believe in the basic tenets of Christianity, right? And for Catholics, I tell you what. Let me finish this point, then I'll do a quick shout out to the sponsor, then I'll come back and the microphone will be yours, right? But this is why something I say again, I say myself, Frank, you might agree with this, you might not. I don't attribute it to you if it's not your view, but it's certainly my view that the fundamental role of the laity now is to take the reins of the church out of the hands of the Hireling Shepherds who are running the church into the ground. Now, as Frank Walker occasionally tells me, that's not exactly a traditional Catholic view of the role of the laity. And my response will be, sure, we can talk about obedience to the clerical caste. We can talk about obedience to bishops and cardinals and popes, which is the proper role, the proper formation of the laity. Once we have course corrected the trajectory, right? Let's do. But at the moment, we're an aeroplane sort of flying direct to a building. We have to storm the cockpit. Let me do a quick shout out, Frank, to our sponsors, and then I'll give you proper serious time when we come back. So let's start off. Let's do Birch Gold. Axios carried this story a couple of days ago that the national debt once again is becoming ever more expensive for American taxpayers, talking about the yields on 10-year treasuries and 30-year treasuries, and the annualized interest costs of the national debt now at $1.2 trillion, which is even more than what the world's greatest military industrial complex spends on defense, right? So let that sink in. And of course, there's only one way really that the federal government is going to get itself out of this mess, and that's by printing more money. And the consequence of printing more money is going to be there's asset inflation and a deterioration of dollar savings. So therefore, folks, as Steve Bannon will always say, we are heading into times of turbulence. And if you want to store your dollars in in an asset that is going to go up, well, gold itself has gone up from a couple of months ago. $4,000 is now back up to just under $4,500 an ounce. It's rocketing away there. If you want to get in on the action, pick up your phone and text Bannon, that's Bannon, to 989898 and speak to Philip Patrick and the team. Say you listen to the show, you understand what's going on. You don't really understand how to perhaps move an IRA into an IRA in physical gold. How is it done? Speak to Philip Patrick and the team. That's what they're there for. They'll give you guys some great pointers. Text once again Bannon to 989898 and see how you get on. All right, Frank Walker, the microphone is yours.
Well, Ben, historically storming the cockpit, the laity, I think that is traditional. That goes back all the way from the beginning of time. In fact, it's our duty. It's our duty because, and you're right, the church continues to be hierarchical regardless of storming the cockpit, because it's not hierarchical with a heretical hierarchy. You have to have a hierarchy that's Catholic. And if you don't, that's when it's time to storm the cockpit. I know it sounds like a complicated situation, but that's just the way it's played out over history. There's a nun that they quoted, the National Catholic Reporter on this, Levine, who's running the Catholic Bible Association, well integrated with the bishops and the Vatican, teaching courses, this Jewish lady, teaching courses and writing for L'Osservatore Romano, the Vatican's paper. But this nun says that what I'm interested, because she's a big supporter of this woman, what I'm interested in doing is taking Jesus' humanity with the full seriousness and seeing him as embedded in a particular time and place as a Jewish man, because if we get the culture wrong, we're going to get Jesus wrong. And so she's a scholar. It doesn't really matter whether she's Catholic or not. What matters is her holy scholarship. They did this with the Land of Lake statement at Notre Dame 60 years ago. And from then on, Catholic schools were no longer Catholic. They were just scholarly. That's more important. And that's what they have here. They're going to get the culture right so they can change Jesus, because everybody has, these feminists, none, says that everybody has Jesus wrong. And she's even got LGBT, this Jewish lady, she's more than just about excising things that she doesn't like that make the Pharisees look bad from the Bible. She's also about making the Bible more gay. And she doesn't like how it says, we love the sinner, but not the sin. That's not helpful. She has all kinds of commentary on whether or not the Catholicism is good or not. So like you would expect from someone who hates the church and is an enemy, she has a very sweet disposition, but she is a full-scale radical enemy, just like our hierarchy in Rome is today.
This is the point. You've got to go beyond the superficialities of niceness, right? And look at because we're not saved by niceness. Jesus Christ never promised us salvation through being nice. It's through faith in Jesus Christ, and through works, of course. So that's the issue here. And this lady, however nice she might be, she's looked at all of this. She spent her entire life studying the New Testament. She'll know the New Testament, better than I guess 99% of Catholics. Probably not 99% of evangelicals, but she'll know the New Testament better than 99% of Catholics. But the point is this: she knows the New Testament and she rejects the idea, the thesis, right, that from the New Testament you can draw the conclusion that Jesus Christ was God, was the Messiah. That's the point. And you cannot have someone who spent their life studying the New Testament and who comes out with the conclusion, nope, Christ simply wasn't the Messiah, as the head of the Catholic Biblical Association, right? It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's absolutely, she has to go.
Her readings. Okay, you'll get her readings at Mass, too.
And I don't, you know what? No, well, of course, for those who go to the old Mass, no, you won't.
You won't have that problem.
You won't have that problem. All right, we're going to quickly go over to Jenny, who is been waiting very patiently in the wings because she knew we were going to hit this one and go on. Before I do, a quick shout out to Tax Network USA. Folks, you know that there's a special landing page prepared now, bannon.tnusa.com. If you call 1-800-958-1000, or go to the website I just mentioned, bannon.tnusa.com, you can speak to the guys there and they'll give you a free IRS research and discovery call to let you know what your situation is. This is especially useful if you've received some kind of notification from the IRS saying that you owe money. It's especially useful, for example, if you think you might actually owe back taxes or if you haven't filed in years. And of course, you take these notices, stick them in the drawer, and magically the problem goes away. Well, it does go away for 9 out of 10 things. This isn't one of those things that is going to go away if you ignore it. That's why, once again, Tax Network USA offering a completely free iOS research and discovery call. Won't cost you anything. Just phone them up, give them the details. They'll tap them into the computer and they'll tell you what the situation is. And if you do owe something, they can tell you how that compares to what the iOS says you owe, and they might be able to tell you how you can get that figure down a bit. Once again, 1-800-958-1000. Or go to bannon.tnusa for taxnetworkusa.com. Bannon.tnusa.com. All right, Jenny Holland. I will welcome onto the show. I will hope that you are sufficiently de-hedged after traveling back from Italy today.
It was a sprint.
Oh, right, okay.
It was a sprint.
So look, what's the matter with Kansas? The Democratic gubernatorial nominee, Cindy Holscher, has suggested that Jesus Christ could have been transgender. I have no idea, she says, if Jesus was trans, gay, straight, etc. Look, the point is, this was said, and it's emerged recently, but this was said in a social media debate on X. Folks, don't get into social media arguments on X. I never do. She got into one in 2023, and this is what she really thinks all came out. Some of these posts have actually even been deleted. But now she's been selected as the nominee for Kansas for governor, and she's going through hitting delete pretty quickly. My take on this, Jenny, and I'll give way to you and ask you for yours now. My take on this is that the importance here is what was said when she had no expectation of being the nominee. And to contrast that with why it was deleted. And the reason why it was so what was said is representative of what she actually thinks. And why it was deleted was because now she needs to pretend to be, as most Democrats and indeed Republicans do at election time, now she needs to pretend to have the same views as ordinary, regular Americans. All right, but I know you're following this, and this is sort of it follows two things that you are very interested in, which is how people talk about Christ in the public sphere, but also the trans issue as well. Because the reason that she was mocking our Lord and Savior so much was because she was trying to excuse drag, was it school hour for drag queens? What was I forget what it's called now. But the appalling monstrosity of child abuse that they did in schools. She was defending drag queen story hour in schools, and that's why she said she had no idea whether Jesus was trans, gay, or straight. No Jenny, idea. What's your thoughts? No idea at all. What thoughts and analysis,
who can
please?
Say, Ben? I mean, really, who can say? Who among us can really say whether or not Jesus was trans?
Well, I tell you who won't be able to say, and that's the Catholic Biblical Association. But we'll move on pretty quickly.
This story, forgive my laughter because it's not an indication that I don't take it seriously, but you couldn't write satire this biting. You really couldn't. Like Jonathan Swift could come down from heaven and he would not be able, words would fail him. So there's a couple of really important signifiers in this story. One is for anyone out in the audience, and I doubt there is, but just in case there is, if there's anyone out in the audience who thinks that culture war issues are just distractions and frivolities, and we really need to focus on meat and butter issues or foreign policy or anything else, disabuse yourself of that notion immediately. The phrase culture war is just a polite term for what it actually is, which is spiritual war, which what it really is spiritual attack. This woman, who I never heard of before this morning because I don't follow Kansas politics, not surprisingly, is not even a radical candidate. And yes, this is what she said in 2023, and forgive my looking down at the screen because it really needs to be spoken of specifically. She posted a photograph of Jesus with children and wrote underneath it, "So what about this?" with 4 question marks, implying that drag queens reading to children was akin to Jesus welcoming children, for the children unto me. When someone challenged her on this and was she implying that Jesus was transgender, she wrote, "I have no idea if Jesus was trans, gay, straight, etc. But wait, you seem to imply a sacred figure is less than if they aren't straight."
Jenny, continue. Hold that for 10 seconds. We'll be back in 2 minutes and then continue the sentence.
Still America's Voice family.
Are you on Getter yet?
No?
What are you waiting for?
It's free.
It's uncensored, and it's where all the biggest voices in conservative media are speaking out.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
That's right. You can follow all of your favorites. Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk, Jack Posobiec.
And so many more.
Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
You know, one of the great things I really can't wait for as we sit and prepare this show is Jenny Holland's takes on things. Jenny's a professional writer. Jenny, I've been talking about the culture war for about 30 years since I first got into politics. You put this so brilliantly in the previous segment. The culture war. I'm not only will I quote this, I will actually steal it. Culture war is simply the polite term for spiritual warfare. That is so true. So look, that was, I just want to underline that so everyone makes a note of that and then uses it. Quote Jenny if you want, or just pass it off as your own material, as you will. That's why the war room exists, to give you guys the great argumentative thematic material to win at dinner table conversations. So Jenny, you were quoting the Holscher as saying, but you seem to imply that a sacred figure is less than if they aren't straight. That's too bad.
Yes, that's too bad. So really important thing to note here, that Holscher is not the radical candidate. She is not a DSA-aligned figure. She is not considered to be sort of out there in woke ideology. She's not a blue-haired, morbidly obese, crazy person with a nose ring. This is a very respectable-seeming, middle-aged woman who is trying to make this argument that Jesus and his protection of and care for young children and the innocence of young children is the same thing or equivalent to drag queens, that demi-monde sort of perversion of nightlife, reading stories to children. So, I mean, but also note the way she says this. I mean, this is not a person who's operating at a high intellectual level. I mean, does this woman even have 3 brain cells to rub together to post, so what about this, as if she had some sort of major gotcha with comparing Jesus to drag queens? These people are so moronic and they're so profoundly unwise that they should not be anywhere near power. But she is just one of many. This is the problem going into the midterms in October, that anyone who is still considers themselves an independent needs to understand that this woman does not represent a fringe element of the Democratic Party. Even if you're an atheist, even if you are anti-church, to see something so glib and so dumb, like genuinely just really stupid, a comment like that from a person who now wants to lead an entire state really needs to give you pause. She is not the only one, and we're talking about red states like Kansas, and we also have the inestimable James Tallarico in Texas, who is saying similar things like God is non-binary and yada, yada, yada. And he claims to be a seminarian or have been a seminarian. And again, he is also not a radical, fire-breathing communist candidate. He is the establishment Democrat. Abandon all hope, ye who enter with Democrats. They are completely unsalvageable. They are absolutely a threat to this nation. That this is how far woke ideology, i.e. spiritual warfare, has seeped into the Democratic Party, that these candidates, these Jesus is a drag queen and God is non-binary candidates, are their normie candidates. This has to be drummed home to any remaining independents who don't want to come out in October, because the actual fate of Western civilization rests in these days as we are trying to push back against these absolute Looney Tunes.
Jenny, you've just handed me the segue into the third block, perfectly on the point of defending Western civilization. We're going to hit that now with Frank. Look, so I'm going to resist the temptation of saying we're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. All right, so your point here is that Cindy Holscher may not be morbidly obese. She may not have blue hair and the nose ring, but she's still, to use another one, I can't stop quoting your celebrated phrases, she's basically still an orc in a sparkly dress. Which is what you used to describe another woke character on the show a couple of weeks ago. Brilliant line. I had so much feedback about that. All right, okay. Let's hope the good folk of Kansas know exactly what they're going to be, what the issues are when they then vote. All right, Frank Walker. Look, the reason why I like this story, I like this story anyway because it's exactly the sort of thing I want to see. But I had at the back of my head what you said last week when you went out of your way to indicate Pete Hegseth as the idea of, you think of someone who is confident with their Christian faith in their public life, about why their Christian faith inspires them to act in the way that they do, making those contributions for the public good. So I saw this story then. We'll pull up the Associated Press version, that US military base schools are now putting a new emphasis on Western civilization and Christianity. And of course, the usual suspects are absolutely outraged. But I think, the more I see things like this, look, folks who watch the show will know that I'm not really all in on the present war between the US and Iran, not particularly all in on that. Let me put it like that. However, Pete Hegseth is going out on these things, on the importance of defending Western civilization. I think Pete Hegseth really is leading from the front. And of course, the idea is because these military schools are directly overseen via the Department of Defense Education Activity. The idea is that this is a test run of recentering public education around these values, because this Department of Defense Education Activity already operates 160 or so schools educating roughly 70,000 students. Frank Walker, I know you're following this. What is Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of War, to use the contemporary terminology? What is that? What exactly is he trying to see kids these days have a greater appreciation of?
It's wonderful, really, to see, because he's a Secretary of War, but he has a perspective of conquest. He looks at this culture that Jen just described, and he says the biggest problem they have is they've taken over our minds. We're ignorant, like this orc that was just described in Kansas. We're ignorant and stupid. And we don't get the basics that we have because they have sabotaged our minds, and it's so prevalent, like the mess of the Catholic Church. It's so prevalent that we don't even know we're in the middle of it. But Hegseth says we are here, and we need to get there. And I know this isn't about war, but it's a war, and it's a spiritual war. And this is my approach to it. It's really not that radical. All he's doing is trying to recover what was there, 60 years ago, and all of they've thrown aside who we are, and he even uses those words. He's introducing a course centered on Western civilization and Christianity for military families, and he's mentioned 70,000 schools. I mean, that's like over 100 schools, hundreds of schools of all the military schools. And they're going to get, it's really sort of, it's something out of I don't know if you were familiar with Hillsdale College in Michigan, but that college receives no government funding, and it teaches a classical education. And Hillsdale is great, and all sorts of wonderful people come and speak there all the time. But they have, in recent years, they have farmed out to all sorts of public schools and charter schools. So now, here where I live, there's a couple of different places where you can go and get a Hillsdale College charter school education, even in a public school. And so they're just taking that well-done course that's tried and true, and they're putting it back for the military people. The critics get upset at things like, oh, it's too Christian. Oh, and it makes Islam look like it's warlike. And the Crusades makes the Crusades look like it wasn't, both sides just fighting each other, that it was sort of prompted by Islam, and there's things like that. But what Hegseth has said clearly is that we need to know who we are. We have who we are taken from us, and we need to get our culture back.
From the perspective of these cultural elites who hate everything about Christianity and hate everything unique about America, it's obviously appalling to them that people who are fighting in the forces, American forces, whose kids are being educated under this scheme. It's absolutely really bad that people might have an idea that that men and women in uniform going out to defend American interests abroad might actually be fighting for American interests abroad, right, and for the American way of life. That's absolutely terrible. If people have a greater appreciation of what that way of life is, where it comes from, because of course the secularists who are opposing this, they're saying, oh look, there's too much confusion here between Western civilization and Christianity, and they're not totally synonymous with one another. These are people who hate. It's basically simple as this. They hate Christianity because they hate Jesus Christ. They hate America because it was founded on Christian ideals. They hate Western civilization because it was founded on Christian precepts and ideals of Christian culture that had permeated there. And the last thing they want, these people, having successfully driven prayer from schools and all the rest of it, the last thing they want is people being taught, well, hang on, these things aren't necessarily true. There is a straight line. And to come back to Jen's point earlier, which sets this up pretty perfectly, that when we talk about the culture wars, it's simply a polite term for spiritual warfare. Look, back to Jenny now in a moment for the closing minutes of the show. Quick shout out once again to our sponsors of the show. It's Birch Gold. Text, I gave you the details before of exactly what's going on right now. $1.2 trillion per year being spent simply on servicing the national debt. That's more than America spends on defense. And that debt is going to be, in one way or another, inflated away. So get your savings out of dollars into something that can resist. And gold is the traditional hedge for that. Speak to Philip Patrick and his team at text Bannon, BANNON to 989898. And most Americans are forced to spend too much money on healthcare and getting too little in return. Go to freedomforhealth.org. That's all one word, freedomforhealth.org/Bannon, and discover why tens of thousands of patriots are joining America's Health Share. America's Health Share reduces your healthcare costs by an average of 60%, and it is accepted everywhere. So goodbye to out-of-network limitations. They're offering coverage for as low as $68 per month, and an individual can get great healthcare coverage minus all the complications arising out of price gouging from the larger healthcare providers. Go once again to freedomforhealth.org/Bannon to learn more. And right now, new members can get their first month of healthcare coverage absolutely free with promo code Bannon. All right, Jenny Holland, you have been very keen to discuss with the War Room Posse this article that you saw in Compact Mag, because it answers the question that implicitly arises pretty much every Wednesday when we discuss the flood of young men, young Gen Z guys between 18 and 30, embracing an increasingly muscular Christianity. What are the ladies doing? What are the women doing? What are Gen Z women doing? This is the article that you spotted that goes somewhat to answer that question, raising at the beginning of the article the point that rather unusually in the present times, it's a reversal of the usual trend that it's normally women who are religious rather than guys. And right now, at this moment in history, that's actually sort of pretty much inverted. It's the guys who are being increasingly offering leadership in the household on religious matters, and women are not doing so. This article goes into it. Tell us, what are the findings?
Yeah, this is an absolutely fascinating article that I think we should maybe even return to at another time, because there are so many precious little pieces of information in this that we don't have time to hit them all. So Georgina Mumford, a young English woman, wrote about her own sort of spiritual journey rejoining the Catholic Church, and how she has set out to find the, as she calls it, the elusive female convert. And she interviews a handful of women who just are providing such interesting insight into the things, the conditions that young women are living under today that drove these women away from sort of contemporary social and cultural and sexual mores back in or into the arms of the Catholic Church. One of the women, some of them were reverts, some of them were entirely new converts. It's a bit of a mix, and they're from various different places, and they're all in their 20s. They're young women. One of them said something incredibly interesting, which was that she was living a very sort of liberated lifestyle, as we would euphemistically say, describe it. And she felt enslaved. And the interviewer actually sort of stops her and doesn't quite understand what she means by that, and the interviewer assumes that she was referring to a specific boyfriend who was maybe a controlling bad boyfriend. And she said, no, I was enslaved to my passions. And that really stopped me in my tracks, because that is a profound truth that Christianity has always taught. You even someone like me who's very secular, I have gleaned that messaging just from having a classical Western liberal education, like a fairly old-fashioned education. But you never, ever, ever hear that message any longer. Young people get the opposite message, which is follow your passion, follow your bliss, center yourself. Women most especially. And the woke cultural revolution, i.e., spiritual warfare, has been most effective, I am sad to say, on women. It's almost as if it was perfectly designed to hijack a lot of our natural good qualities, our empathy, our desire to collaborate, our desire to help and nurture and improve things around us. All of those natural tendencies have been hijacked in this vile, woke spiritual attack. And these women are definitely in the minority because, as it says, not women are leaving the church in greater numbers than they are joining it. But these are a handful of very special, very perceptive young women who have pinpointed exactly where modernity has failed them. It has centered them too much. It has given them too much freedom. Again, completely counterintuitive in today's world. Everything is about agency. Everything is about choice. Everything is about freedom. Actually, that turns out to be a bad thing. It's taken me to the age of 50 years old to actually really fully understand that for myself. These young women have figured it out still in their 20s. So whilst they might be small in number, there is hope out there on the internet and out there in real parishes. There is hope where people are just picking up on the utter debasement of the kind of national conversation, the cultural conversation. Idiots like that woman in Kansas or that stupid man in Texas who are saying these patently absurd things and sort of flaunting their own stupidity, and women flaunting vulgarity and flaunting promiscuity and all of these things where decorum has been destroyed and denigrated. And I think it is in our natures, many of us, it is just in our natures to want to claw some of that back. And that seems to be happening.
Jenny, you're absolutely right in everything you said, including your opener. You are going to have to come back to this article and hit this in more detail. It is fascinating. I think there's a slightly Augustinian flavour to this as well, and we can discuss that as well. It's true that these are truths that really we are left to discover. The historical truths of Christianity are truths we are being left to discover anew for ourselves, because we're certainly not being taught them by the institutional hierarchical church. Jenny, very quickly, 10 seconds, social media, where do people go?
Most of my stuff is on YouTube at Saving Culture from Itself, and my essays are on Substack. Jenny E. Hall.
Frank Walker, social media, 10 seconds.
Canon212.com and the video, daily videos at Rumble and at Gloria TV. Also, Canon212 spot out at X.
Folks, that's all we've got time for. My great thanks to Jenny Holland, Frank Walker today. Thanks to Will at Real America's Voice for holding this show together. Steve, back in the chair, 10 a.m. tomorrow. God bless for now.